Jayam Shri Vishnupad Paramahansa Parabhajapacharya Satara, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya, His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. All glories, all glories, all glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Hare Krishna, good morning. So it's been 5 years since I've been to the holy land of Sri Vrindavan, and all the beautiful faces are still here. Some of them looking a little older, including myself, but everybody looking very blissful to be at the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada in his wonderful temple of Sri Krishna Balaram. Today is beginning a new chapter. Chapter 54 from the 10th canto. So there's a little intro, and our Mahatma Prabhu asked me to please read that. The marriage of Krishna and Rukmini. This chapter describes how Lord Sri Krishna defeated the opposing kings after kidnapping Rukmini, disfigured Rukmini's brother Rukmi, brought Rukmini to his capital, and married her. As Sri Krishna was taking Princess Rukmini away, the inimical kings gathered their armies and pursued him. Lord Baladeva and the generals of the Yadava army turned to face these opponents, blocking their advance. The enemy armies then began pouring incessant showers of arrows upon Lord Krishna's army. Seeing her husband-to-be's forces under such violent attack, Srimati Rukmini looked at Sri Krishna fearfully, but Krishna simply smiled and told her there was nothing to fear because his army would surely destroy the enemies in short order. Lord Balaram and the other heroes then began to annihilate the opposing armies with Naracha arrows. The enemy kings, headed by Jarasandha, retreated after suffering the destruction of their armies at the hands of the Yadavas. Jarasandha consoled Shishupala. Happiness and distress are never permanent and are under the control of the Supreme Lord. 17 times Krishna defeated me, but in the end, I was victorious over him. Thus, seeing that victory and defeat are under the control of destiny and time, I have learned not to succumb to either lamentation or joy. Time now favors the Yadavas, so they have defeated you with only a small army, but in future time will favor you, and you will surely conquer them. Consoled in this way, Shishupala took his followers and returned to his kingdom. Rukmini's brother, Rukmi, who hated Krishna, was infuriated by Krishna's kidnapping of his sister. So after vowing before all the kings present that he would not return to Kundina until Krishna had been destroyed and Rukmini rescued, Rukmi set out with his army to attack the Lord. Ignorant of Lord Krishna's glories, Rukmi boldly went out to attack Krishna in a lone chariot. He approached the Lord, struck him with arrows, and demanded that he release Rukmini. Sri Krishna fended off Rukmi's weapons, breaking them to pieces, and then he raised his sword high and was about to kill Rukmi when Rukmini interceded and fervently pleaded that her brother's life be spared. Lord Krishna did not kill Rukmi, but with his sword he shaved off bits of Rukmi's hair here and there, leaving him disfigured. Just then Lord Baladeva appeared on the scene with the Yadava army. Seeing Rukmi disfigured, he gently approached Kṛṣṇa. To disfigure such a close family member is as good as killing him. Therefore, he should not be killed, but set free. Lord Baladev then told Rukmini that the sorry condition of her brother was only the fruit of his past work, since everyone is responsible for his own happiness and suffering. He further instructed her about the transcendental position of the jiva soul and how the illusion of happiness and distress is simply a result of ignorance. Accepting Lord Balaram's instructions, Rukmini gave up her sorrow. Rukmi, meanwhile, felt totally frustrated, deprived as he was of all his strength and his will to fight. Since he had vowed not to return home without conquering Kṛṣṇa, Rukmi constructed a city on that very spot and took up residence there in a mood of undiminished anger. Lord Kṛṣṇa took Rukmini to his capital, Dwarka, and married her. All the citizens celebrated in lavish style, broadcasting throughout the city accounts of how the Lord had kidnapped Rukmini. Everyone in Dwarka was delighted to see Lord Kṛṣṇa united with Rukmini. So, text 1. Is that the verse we're going to be chanting? Okay, so there's 5 verses that I was given, and none of them have a purport except the last one. And the verse we're being chanted is the first one, and so we'll just kind of limit the number of chanters today to move along. So word by word in translation, śrī-śuka uvāca. Śukadeva Gosvāmī said, Iti, thus speaking, sarve, all of them, su-saṁrabdhā, greatly angered, vāhān, their conveyances, āruhya, mounting, daṁśitāḥ, wearing armor, svaiḥ, each by his own, balaiḥ, military force, parikrāntā, surrounded, anvīyur, they followed, dhṛta, holding, kārmukāḥ, their bows, śrī-śuka uvāca, iti sarve su-saṁrabdhā, vāhān āruhya daṁśitāḥ, svair balaiḥ parikrāntā, anvīyur dhṛta-kārmukāḥ,
sarve su-saṁrabdhā, vāhān āruhya daṁśitāḥ, svair balaiḥ parikrāntā, anvīyur dhṛta-kārmukāḥ, sarve su-saṁrabdhā, vāhān āruhya daṁśitāḥ, svair balaiḥ parikrāntā,
Ladies, translation by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Śukadeva Gosvāmī said, having thus spoken, all these infuriated kings donned their armor and mounted their conveyances. Actually, the translation is by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. My apologies. Having thus spoken, all these infuriated kings donned their armor and mounted their conveyances. Each king, bow in hand, was surrounded by his own army as he went after Lord Kṛṣṇa. Text 2. Tanapatata halokya yadavanika yatu apaha tastustatat samukarazan vispurya swadanu misite. Translation. The commanders of the Yadava army, seeing the enemy racing to attack, turned to face them and stood firm, O king, twanging their bows. Text 3. Asva priste gajaskande rato paste strakovitaha mumuchu saravarsani mega adrishu apoyata. Translation. Mounted on the back of horses, the shoulders of elephants, and the seats of chariots, the enemy kings, expert with weapons, rained down arrows upon the Yadus like clouds pouring rain on the mountains. Text 4. Patyor balam sarasvaras sanam vikshya sumadhyama savridam aksatad vaktam vayavi valalochana. Translation. Slender-waisted Rukmini, seeing her lord's army covered by torrents of arrows, shyly looked at his face with fear-stricken eyes. Text 5. Prahasya bhagavanaha masma vair ramalochane vinakshya tatiyan adunaivaltat tavakaye satravam valam. Translation. In response, the Lord laughed and assured her, "Do not be afraid, beautiful-eyed one. This enemy force is about to be destroyed by your soldiers." Purport. To express his great affection for Rukmini, Lord Kṛṣṇa gallantly referred to his own Yadava army as your men, indicating that the Lord's entire dynasty was now the property of his beloved queen. The Supreme Lord Kṛṣṇa desired to share his blissful opulences with all living beings, and thus he sincerely invites them to come back home, back to Godhead. The Krishna consciousness movement, introduced throughout the world by Srila Prabhupada on the order of his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, who himself preached all over India on the order of his exalted father, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is broadcasting the loving message of Lord Kṛṣṇa. Remember him, serve him, return to him, and share in the infinite bounty of the kingdom of God. I guess you can repeat. In response, the Lord laughed and assured her, "Do not be afraid, beautiful-eyed one. This enemy force is about to be destroyed by your soldiers." Om Jnana-mrandasya jananasakalaya chakshumilitam yena tasmai Sri-Gurave Namaha. Namo, everybody, you all know this. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskacha Dasatarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vaivyacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So this story of Rukmini has been going on now for a little while, and probably everybody has been hearing the story, because it seems to be that when you start in and you haven't been around, you have this tendency to repeat the story. And for the people who live here, it might like, oh, here we go again. But then there's others who have come in, and they might be thinking, yeah, what is that story? So I'll try not to be too boring by repeating some of it. But there's going to be kind of 3 parts, actually 4 parts to this class, if I can get through it in time. The whole situation here is one of radical love. And there are instances of radical love in the Bhagavatam with amazing ladies. Sometimes we're given to consider that these ancient, long ago, like, so long ago, Prabhupada's time immemorial, ladies were, these little, you never see them covered up people. But there were some radical ladies, and Rukmini, at the age of 13, 14, that gave her age, is one of them. Another one is Subhadra, and what to speak of Radharani. And there's one god sister of ours, who I will not say her name just because I haven't asked her permission to tell her story, but it fits in. So, and then a couple ending words about Rathayatra Jayananda on that wonderful class the other day. So, this king of Vidarbha, Maharaj Bhishmaka, had 5 sons and a young daughter known as Rukmini. And many saintly persons would visit the king's palace. And from all these saintly persons, Rukmini was hearing information about Lord Kṛṣṇa, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This actually phrase, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is just so wonderful. It's a signature of Srila Prabhupada, and it's that phrase that connected me to the desire to meet Srila Prabhupada in 1966, upon being showed the first canto of the Bhagavatam by Mukunda, now Maharaj. Having seen plenty of imposter gurus and pseudo-spiritualistic persons, I wasn't too eager to meet another one. But when he showed me this book, because none of these people came with anything to offer except babbling words, and looking at this incredible book that had the original Sanskrit, the word-by-word transliteration, the translation, the purports, and I kept seeing this phrase, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I never heard that before. And that is, in itself, is a fantastic interjection into modern life by Srila Prabhupada. So, Rukmini was hearing about him, and simply by hearing about the opulences of Krishna, she desired to become his wife. And all of her relatives of King Bhishmaka, they also agreed, yeah, Rukmini should be given in marriage to Krishna after hearing. And Krishna, after hearing about Rukmini, he also agreed that she should become his wife. So one thing to consider here, watch out what you put into your ears. We should be very careful what we put into our ears. And if we pour Krishna into our ears, the results can only be favorable. Just like if you go to a store, you're buying something and there's a list of ingredients. You want to be careful what goes into your mouth. Also should be careful what comes out of your mouth, but you're just looking at the ingredients. Okay, it's okay. So even more important, what comes into the ear. So this young girl, this young princess, she took a radical step, and she wrote a letter to Krishna, giving it to a Brahmana messenger who was sent with her letter to the capital city of Krishna, to Dwarka. And upon reaching the gates of Dwarka, the Brahmana informed the doorkeeper he had a mission. And the doorkeeper took him to Krishna. Krishna was sitting on a golden throne. Messenger was greeted according to his Brahminical status, and then he carefully read Rukmini's letter to the Supreme Lord. I've shortcutted it a little bit, but in essence, my dear Krishna, since you are the supreme, my dear Krishna, oh infallible one, most beautiful one, I have heard of your transcendental qualities. I may be shameless in expressing myself so directly, but you have captivated me and taken my heart. I'm an unmarried girl, and you may doubt my steadiness of character. But my dear Krishna, since you're the supreme lion among human beings, the supreme person among persons, any girl not yet out of home, or any woman of the highest chastity would desire to marry you, being captivated by your unprecedented character, your knowledge, your opulence, your position. And she further went on, I know you are very kind to your devotees, therefore I have decided to become your eternal maidservant. My dear Lord, I dedicate my life and my soul to your lotus feet. I have selected your lordship as my husband, and I request you to accept me as your wife. And she expressed, now, didn't even have an answer yet, but by simply that expression, she was convinced in her heart that Krishna would accept her. So now I belong to you. It would be ludicrous if that what is enjoyable by the lion is taken by the jackal. Therefore, I request you to immediately take care of me before I'm taken away by Shishupal. Please come here, catch my hand so that he might not be touched by Shishupal and his men, because in that long ago era, we often say the Vedic time, a girl was never touched by anyone except perhaps her father or brother. So if another man touched even slightly, like took her hand, that was it, she was finished. Either she had to marry the guy or that her life was doomed. So come here and catch my hand, Krishna, so that I may not be touched by Shishupal. So Krishna was very pleased to hear her statement, and he told, my dear Brahmana, I'm glad to hear that Rukmini is anxious to marry me, since I'm also anxious to marry her. I can understand that Rukmini's brother has arranged her marriage to Shishupal in a spirit of animosity towards me. So I'm going to give him a good lesson. Just as one can bring fire out of ordinary wood by proper manipulation, I shall bring Rukmini like fire from their midst. So then when Krishna heard that Rukmini's marriage was scheduled for the following day, he decided to leave for the kingdom of Vidarbha immediately. He ordered his chariot and the driver. They started at once, and just overnight they rode 1,000 miles to their destination, the city of Kundina. So then Balaram, he received the news that Krishna had left for Kundina accompanied only by a Brahmana, and that Shishupal was there with his ally Jarasandha and a large number of soldiers. And he was suspecting they would attack Krishna. So Balaram took a strong military division of chariots, infantry, horses, elephants. He rode to Kundina. Kundina is located in Maharashtra. I can't exactly pinpoint it, but it's in Maharashtra somewhere. So meanwhile, inside the palace, Rukmini's expecting Krishna to arrive. And you can imagine she's probably pacing the floor. But when neither he nor the Brahmana messenger returned or appeared, She became full of anxiety. She was feeling unfortunate. There's only one night before my marriage and neither the Brahmana or Kṛṣṇa has returned. I can't understand this. And Kṛṣṇa, being the super soul in all living entities, he understood Rukmini's anxiety. So he sent the Brahmana inside the palace just to let her know he had arrived. Rukmini was elated to see the Brahmana, and the Brahmana announced, "The son of the Yadu dynasty, Śrī-śuka, has arrived." And he further encouraged her by saying, Kṛṣṇa had promised to carry her away without fail. So Rukmini wanted to give him something in charity, and she's looking around, but she just couldn't find anything suitable, so she simply bowed her head down and offered her humble obeisances and respects, kind of like the peacocks offering their tails to Kṛṣṇa. So when King Bhishmaka heard that Kṛṣṇa and Balaram had come, he invited them to see the marriage ceremony of his daughter. Of course, he's thinking the marriage ceremony is going to be with Sisupal. And he received them and the soldiers in a garden house. In the meantime, Rukmini came out of the palace. And this was, I think, described in verse 50 in the previous chapter. Quite elaborate description. She came out of the palace and went to the temple of Durga. And it described how she was dressed, beautifully dressed, and she gravely proceeded toward the temple. Her mother, her girlfriends were by her side. She was surrounded by royal bodyguards. As she entered the temple, she was offering prayers to the deity. And of course, her prayers, "Let Kṛṣṇa become my husband." Normally, people pray to Durga for some wealth, fame, strength, and so on. But Rukmini only desired Kṛṣṇa for her husband. And then she caught hold of the hand of one of her girlfriends and left the temple, accompanied by the others. And when she came out, all the visitors and the princes who had come to Kudina for the marriage were assembled outside the temple to see Rukmini. And when they caught sight of her leaving, they were struck with wonder. She appeared as a youth, not more than 13 or 14 years old. Now, I want to pause here. 13 or 14. In this day and age, that would not fly. And it's describing her beautiful green eyes, her pink lips, her scattered hair, different kinds of earrings around her face, her jeweled lockets. Her bodily luster and the beauty of Rukmini was specifically intended to attract the attention of Kṛṣṇa. But the assembled princes, they could also notice, and they were overwhelmed, and they became unconscious. They fell from the back of their horses and elephants. They were hopelessly desired Rukmini, but she had no interest in any of them. In her heart, she only expected Kṛṣṇa to come and carry her away. And as she was adjusting the ornaments on the finger of her left hand, she happened to look out among the princes, and suddenly she saw Kṛṣṇa was among them. Now, mind you, she had never seen Kṛṣṇa before, only hearing about him, only meditating on him. Immediately, she knew who he was. So ignoring the princes, Kṛṣṇa immediately took Rukmini and placed her on his chariot. And then you'd think he would take off. He proceeded very slowly, without fear, taking Rukmini away exactly as a lion snatches a deer from the midst of the jackals. And meanwhile, Balaram appeared on the scene with the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty. So Jarasandha, as we heard in the little thing that I have to read, he began to roar, "How is this? Kṛṣṇa's taking Rukmini away without any opposition. We're losing our reputation by this action." So, led by Jarasandha, all the princes became angry at Kṛṣṇa for kidnapping Rukmini. And they stood up, they armed themselves with bows and arrows. And as they began to chase Kṛṣṇa on their chariots, horses, elephants, soldiers of the Yadu dynasty turned to face them. The princes opposing Kṛṣṇa, they were expert fighters. And they shot their arrows at the Yadu soldiers, just as a cloud splashes the face of a mountain with torrents of rain. Jarasandha was determined to defeat Kṛṣṇa and capture Rukmini, recapture Rukmini. And his companions, all of them, they fought as severely as possible. And Rukmini, who was seated by Kṛṣṇa's side, again, she's 13, 14-year-old, she looked at Kṛṣṇa and she was grateful that Kṛṣṇa had taken this great risk for her. Kṛṣṇa understood and he encouraged her, "My dear Rukmini, don't worry. The soldiers of the Yadu dynasty will kill all of their opponents without delay." And Balaram and the commanders of the Yadu soldiers, they could not tolerate the defiant attitude of Jarasandha's army. So they started counter-strike with their arrows. And as the fighting progressed, the princes and the soldiers of the enemy, like we're hearing about the enemy a lot. Yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before, our temple president here raised that question about enemies? So obvious, he was asking if there was enemy. Obviously there were enemies because it's repeated over and over. So they countered their strike, and as it progressed, the princes and the soldiers of the enemy began to fall from their horses. This time they didn't faint, they were killed. Fell from the horses, their chariots, the elephants. At Rukmini's request, the Lord agreed not to kill her foolish brother Rukmi. At the same time, he wanted to give him some little notice, some little punishment. So when the enemy realized they were defeated, they were being defeated, they thought it was unwise of them to continue fighting and losing more men, all for the sake of Shishupal, who wasn't even there. They were thinking, Shishupal himself should have fought. He should be here fighting to rescue Rukmini from the hands of Kṛṣṇa. But when they saw Shishupal was not even competent enough to fight with Kṛṣṇa, they decided not to waste their strength unnecessarily. So they ceased fighting and they dispersed. And now Rukmi, he was determined to teach Kṛṣṇa a lesson. So he drew his bow and forcefully shot 3 arrows against Kṛṣṇa's body. "You are proud of your military strength," he said. "I shall relieve you of your false prestige. You can keep my sister only as long as I do not pin you to the ground with my arrows." So upon hearing these crazy words from Rukmi, Lord Kṛṣṇa immediately shot an arrow and severed his bowstring. Rukmi took another bow. He shot 5 arrows. And again, for a second time, Kṛṣṇa again severed his bowstring. Again, Rukmi took up a 3rd bow, and again, Kṛṣṇa cut all its strings. Having run out of bows, Rukmi took to swords, shields, tridents, lances, and weapons, hand-to-hand combat. But Kṛṣṇa destroyed them all. Repeatedly baffled in his attempts, Rukmi finally took out his sword and he ran swiftly toward Kṛṣṇa. And Kṛṣṇa just cut his weapons to pieces. And he took out his own sword and he was prepared to kill him on the spot. And that's when Rukmini, understanding Kṛṣṇa was not going to excuse her brother, fell at his lotus feet. In a very grievous tone, she was trembling with fear, she was pleading, "Please do not kill my brother just before the auspicious occasion of our marriage. I don't want our marriage to cost my elder brother his life." So it was at Rukmini's piteous request, Lord Kṛṣṇa agreed not to kill the foolish Rukmi. But at the same time, as mentioned, some slight punishment had to be there. So he tied Rukmi with a piece of cloth, and he just snipped at his mustache, his beard, his hair, leaving some little spots sprouting hidden there. I mean, that's humiliation to the max. Here he is, and suddenly, Kṛṣṇa then brought Rukmini to Dwarka, and he married her according to Vedic rituals. And the citizens of Dwarka were so pleased. And they dressed up with their finest ornaments and garments and presented gifts to the newlywed couple. And in this way, the residents of Dwarka were extremely jubilant, seeing the Supreme Lord Kṛṣṇa and Rukmini, the goddess of fortune, peacefully united. Rukmini ki jai. So then, we have Radharani. On a half-moon night in the month of Bhadra, King Vrishabhanu, he went to the Jamuna to bathe, and he found himself engulfed in a golden aura of pure love. It was emanating from a lotus, which had a baby girl standing in its whorl. So the king returned to the palace with this baby, and his queen Kirtada was delighted, but she was also shocked because the baby's eyes remained closed, and neither did she make any sounds. Both blind, and we use the word dumb, meaning without able to speak. It was utterly distressing for the king and queen. They'd waited so long for a child. Narada Muni, the mystical sage, appeared, and upon glancing at the silent baby with closed eyes, he remarked, "She's fine." Shortly thereafter, Yasoda, Lord Krishna's mother, came to visit along with Nanda Maharaj and their son. Krishna pulled himself up and he looked at the beautiful girl with closed eyes, and at that moment, Srimati Radharani's eyes fluttered wide open and blossomed like lotuses. She did not want to see anything or anyone of this world, only the beautiful form of her beloved Sri Krishna, and everyone was delighted. So one might say she took her birth out of love for Sri Krishna. Their love was pure, there were no material impediments, yet the divine couple had to take great care not to reveal it. Both were married to other partners. Krishna actually had of course we know 16,108 wives, but he had 8 primary wives. The Bhagavad Purana describes in sequence Rukmini, Satyabhamaja, Bhavati, Kalindi, Mitravinda, Nagjati, also known as Satya, Bhadra, and Lakshmana, also known as Madra. So Rukmini was married with Abhimanyu, who was often referred to as her so-called husband. In her heart, she never wavered from Sri Krishna, her true love. And this love was parikrāntāḥ, unrequited by material standards, but ever increasing in spiritual bliss and bhava, the highest emotion through separation. There's a saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Many stories about how they would resort to charades in order to seek each other's company incognito, especially from Radhamari's mother-in-law, Jatila, who was always looking for ways to catch the two of them together, but she could never quite succeed. Kurukshetra was an epic reunion after 100 years of separation of their celebrated divine love, and it forms the basis of our annual Rath Yatra festivals. The gopis and the gopas and Srimati Radharani coming from Vrindavan in ox carts, meeting Krishna from Dwarka with his army and regalia. Such a stark contrast. Radharani, now I have gained the Lord of my life, in the absence of whom I was being burnt by Cupid and withering away. My dear Krishna, you are the same Krishna. I am the same Radharani. We are meeting, but we're not meeting in the same place. Here you are just like a royal king with chariots and soldiers, your ministers, secretaries. But there in Vrindavan, you are a cowherd boy, and we used to meet in the bushes along the bank of the river Yamuna. So I want to take you there. Only then will I be happy. Radical love. Rath Yatra is a celebration of the gopis, led by Radharani, pulling Krishna back to their hearts, to Vrindavan. And then we have Subhadra, the celebrated sister of Lord Kṛṣṇa. So King Parikshit was inquired from Śukadeva Gosvāmī. You know how people, they want to know about their family history. So he was inquiring, how did his grandmother Subhadra, how was she kidnapped by his grandfather Arjuna at the instigation of Lord Kṛṣṇa? And Śukadeva Gosvāmī narrated, once upon a time. So one time Prabhupada was asked, what does it mean, once upon a time? And Prabhupada said, a very long time ago. The great hero Arjuna was visiting holy places of pilgrimage, and he happened to come to Prabhashetra. While he was there, he heard Balaram gets into these marriage entanglements. So he was negotiating the marriage of his sister Subhadra, the daughter of Arjuna's maternal uncle, Vasudeva. Although her father Vasudeva and her brother Krishna were not in agreement, Balaram favored marrying Subhadra to Duryodhana, of all people. But Arjuna desired to get the hand of Subhadra. Thinking of Subhadra, thinking of her beauty, Arjuna became more and more captivated with the idea of marrying her, so he formed a plan. He dressed himself up like a Vaishnava sannyasi, carrying a tridanda in his hand. You know, the Vaishnava sannyasi's tridanda. So the system of tridanda sannyasi has also been in existence for a very long time. So sannyasis, generally, they travel all over the country for preaching, but during the 4 months of Chaturmas, the rainy season in India, September through December, they stop and they shelter in one place. This is called Chaturmas. And when the sannyasi stays in one place for 4 months, the local inhabitants of that place take advantage of his presence to serve him and become spiritually advanced by his presence. So Arjuna, in this Tridandi sannyas dress, he remained in Dwarka for 4 months, devising a plan how to get Subhadra as his wife. The inhabitants of Dwarka, as well as Balaram, none of them recognized Arjuna. They were offering respects to this sannyasi without knowing the actual situation. And one day, Lord Balaram invited this sannyasi to his home for lunch. Balaramji very respectfully offered all types of palatable dishes, and the so-called sannyasi was eating sumptuously. So while eating at the home of Balaramji, Arjuna was simply looking over the beautiful Subhadra, who was very enchanting even to the great heroes and kings. And out of his love for her, Arjuna determined somehow or other he would achieve Subhadra as his wife. Now Arjuna, the grandfather of Maharaj Parikshit, he was also very handsome and attractive to Subhadra. So in her mind, she determined she would only accept Arjuna as her husband. And as a simple girl, she was smiling with great pleasure, looking at Arjuna. And, Arjuna became more and more captivated, and she was becoming more captivated. In her mind, she totally dedicated herself to Arjuna. And he resolved to marry her by any means. And then he realized he had to act immediately to stop that marriage of Duryodhana to Subhadra, because she'd been promised in marriage to Duryodhana, the promise negotiated by Balaram, and there was no possibility for Arjuna to win her hand through any of the traditional means. There was only one option: kidnap by force. So in this situation, force would actually not be necessary. Why? Because Subhadra was unhappy with the arranged marriage, and she was in love with Arjuna. Arjuna realized eloping was the only means. And Krishna, the previous night, had given a hint. So Subhadra's older brother, Balaram, had given her the duty to take care of the guest, who they thought was a sage. It was considered a great blessing for a young maiden to serve as sage, so in that way she would get the blessings of a good husband and children. Arjuna enjoyed every visit of Subhadra, falling more and more in love with her. Not knowing his true identity, she was delighted in serving him, but after a few visits, she became a little suspicious. Why? Because she found his interactions with her to be slightly overly familiar, especially for a saint. And she noticed his calloused forefinger. Both of his forefingers were callous. This is common for an archer, not for a sage. And the fact that they were both callous was a sign of a great archer. Practical proof that this sage must be Arjuna, the only archer famous for shooting equally well with both the right and left hands. So she asked Arjuna, and he admitted his identity for her. And since our discovery, their courtship undercover was proceeding very smoothly. But in the meantime, the rainy season was coming to an end, and this meant her wedding to Duryodhana would commence. Now was the time to act. Krishna was her biggest ally. Arjuna borrowed Krishna's chariot, and he waited near the temple where Subhadra had gone for puja. And when she came out of the temple, Arjuna drove the chariot in front of her so she could easily get in. When the soldiers on duty saw this, they were thinking Subhadra was being abducted by the sage. But Arjuna caught Subhadra by the arm to put her in the chariot, preparing her to drive. And in that moment, the soldiers started to attack Arjuna, and Subhadra took the reins, and Arjuna immediately started releasing fireworks of arrows, revealing his true identity. The soldiers then ran to the palace to inform Balaram of the situation. And Balaram fell into a rage. It was uncommon to him, but he really got mad, and he pledged to punish Arjuna for breaking the trust by falsely acting like a sage. Balaram felt that the entire Yadava clan had become dishonored by his behavior. And since Arjuna was a close friend of Kṛṣṇa, he suspected Krishna's involvement, and he wanted to confront Kṛṣṇa as well, so he called for him to arrive. And when he arrived, Balaram actually shouted at Kṛṣṇa for remaining silent about his dear friend, insulting them and the Yadava clan by kidnapping their sister. It's an unbearable disgrace upon us, especially after we treated Arjuna so well. Why did you let this happen, not even chasing him down to fight? Kṛṣṇa smiled, as he's wont to do in these type of things. Did I not warn you? Did I not warn you about letting strangers stay in our palace, especially with our young sister around? You are the one who refused to believe me, and now you are trying to blame the event on me. I heard from the soldiers that it was actually our sister Subhadra who was driving the chariot, not Arjuna. Therefore, this is not a kidnapping. It's an elopement initiated by our sister. And Balaram looked at Kṛṣṇa like, why didn't you say anything about the real identity of this so-called sage as well as the love affair? Kṛṣṇa had an answer. As you had already promised Subhadra to Duryodhana, I didn't want you to get involved in an elopement. And this way you're freed of any blame. You didn't know anything. So Duryodhana cannot blame you for breaking your promise. So then Balaram had to accept the marriage of Krishna and Balaram. And the couple was invited back with great honor. The wedding was celebrated grandly in Dwarka. And after some time, it was time for the newlyweds to return to Arjuna's home in Indraprastha. And Subhadra was getting ready to leave with Arjuna. He brought a huge dowry of precious metals, horses, maidens, but there was a problem in taking Subhadra to Indraprastha. What was that problem? The Pandavas, all 5, had married Draupadi. And they had given Draupadi their word they would never bring any of other wives. It was okay for them to have other wives, but they wouldn't bring the other wives into the palace where Draupadi lived. I mean, they wouldn't be in Indraprastha. So while they were allowed to marry according to tradition, Draupadi would be the only wife they would have in Indraprastha. But Arjuna decided to take his chances by returning from exile, bringing his new wife, Subhadra. So while he was welcomed by Kunti and his brothers, Draupadi was missing. When he inquired about her whereabouts, the brothers revealed she was angry. She was heartbroken that Arjuna had broken that promise by bringing his new wife, Subhadra, to Indraprastha. So to save her husband from this awkward situation, Subhadra decided to visit Draupadi in the attire of a cowherd woman. So she went to her chamber, and when Draupadi asked who she was, she said she had come to serve her as her maid, and she fell at Draupadi's feet. Draupadi became suspicious, and she asked her to speak the truth. And Subhadra revealed who she was, and she promised Draupadi she would never wish to take her place in Indraprastha. And seeing her humility, Draupadi accepted Subhadra as her younger sister, and thus the situation was saved from any discord. So, I was going to tell a story about another bold lady, not for the Bhagavatam. Of course, I always, Bhagavatam's like a history, connecting everything to Krishna. And then we have the Chaitanya Charitamrita connecting everything to Lord Chaitanya. And I feel like in the future, at some point in time, there will be another book connecting everything to Srila Prabhupada. The events of ISKCON to Srila Prabhupada for all. We have the Leelamrita. That's just a little condensed version. It will be a grander version. But a very sincere, devout daughter of Srila Prabhupada was suddenly and unexpectedly pierced by the arrow of attraction to a powerful, service-orientated Sankirtan book distributor who had never indicated any interest in marriage. Both of them were based in India, although from America. So she took a very daring, bold approach to the situation. Finding out where the Sankirtan party was based, she arrived by train to that destination, bringing with her new white dhoti, chadar, bead bag, and kurta. It so happened that the men, all in orange, were having a strategic Sankirtan meeting in a dimly lit room and she arrived without any announcement or notice. The men were seated in a circle on the floor, planning their upcoming goals and how to achieve them. And suddenly this very chaste woman with a covered head was in the center of the circle, and she stopped in front of one of the best distributors. She made her obeisances to him, at the same time placing the new white dhoti, chadar, bead bag, and kurta before him, and made a bold pronouncement. "I want to marry you. Please accept me as your wife." Now, Kshatriyas are forbidden to turn down the proposal of an innocent maiden. So you could say book distributors, being in the frontline soldiers in Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan army, they're like Kshatriyas. And on top of that, there were several witnesses to the proposal. And amazingly, they all agreed with this principle, that he should accept her hand. He couldn't reject her. And thereupon he confirmed that he accepted her proposal on the spot. So they were married and began to preach the glories of the Sankirtan movement on behalf of Srila Prabhupada ever since that time and up to this very day, actively bringing new devotees to Krishna consciousness. So, and just to tie up, 2 days ago we heard these amazing pastimes of Jayananda Prabhu, ISKCON's first saint, pronounced by Srila Prabhupada, how he was procuring the building supplies of the Rath carts in New York City using decidedly unorthodox means. One might say stealing on behalf of Lord Kṛṣṇa, Lord Jagannath. So by today's newly so-called woke standards, we might feel obliged to scrutinize and even condemn such activities as being unworthy of one who professes to be spiritual. Yes, it is exactly for that reason that we applaud and relish Jayananda's daring exploits and how he involved and encouraged others. He did so out of profound love for Srila Prabhupada, without one iota of what's in it for me. What will I get out of this? He was a one life for Krishna man, uncomplicated, sincere, and sold out to serving Srila Prabhupada and his mission, of which he understood Rath Yatra festivals to be an integral part. Lord Jagannath himself appeared in the West as a result of stealing propensity by one of the young disciples at the time. The large wooden log used to carve the first Lord Jagannath outside of India also appeared as a result of that propensity. The first Rath cart was profusely decorated in flowers. That occurred as a result of that propensity. Prabhupada said the cart should be profusely decorated with flowers. No money, what to do? The devotees went to Golden Gate Park, and the next day, the profusely decorated Rath cart with so many flowers, and there were 2 policemen assigned, each on a horse, to ride alongside the cart. And we were going along Golden Gate Park. One policeman goes, "Where are all the flowers?" And the other policeman pointed to the cart. But amazingly, they took no issue. Had any of this occurred for personal means or personal sense gratification, it would not have been glorious. But the Lord was certainly behind these exploits, or they never would have happened. And to be clear, Srila Prabhupada was not encouraging us in that direction either. It's not as if we bluntly explained how it was that we were able to make these miraculous deities and Rath carts on budgets. We had no budgets. They didn't exist. It was Jagannath, Krishna's mercy that it occurred. And when the need was over, these activities wound up and dissipated. Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Okay, so thank you for your tolerance. All glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Srimad Bhagavatam, Ki Jai.